The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett.
Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody wants that eternal kiss. Yeah, everyone's saying there's more than this. Everyone wants to follow their own bliss. Talking about one love, one blood, one life in everyone. One life, give each other. We are sisters and brothers. We sing
On the Expansion Zone, we examine life and our quest to understand who and what we are and of the vastness of human potentials. We explore the making of our world from quantum physics to parapsychology, health, sociology, and philosophy, along with practical living. You are reminded of the possibilities in creating personal change. So for an hour, we'll stimulate and expand the mind.
shanty, 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 shanty. Sing the world. Let's do it together. Shanty, shanty, shanty. It's time to wake up. Shanty, shanty, to a brighter day. Realize that.
Well, welcome once again to another edition of the Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. I am, of course, your host, Sonia Barrett. And if you are listening to this, of course, it is Monday. And I want to remind you that this is also being videoed because we have such a spectacular guest today. So as always, if you are tuned in to 90.7 FM on your radio dial or kpfk.org, that's fantastic. We're happy for that. And I want to remind you that there's also a podcast. So there's SoundCloud and iTunes and Stitcher and iHeartRadio. So there's all these different options. You've got to get this information. And this is why I'm trying to make sure that it's everywhere that's accessible. So, I like to start you off with a little quote. And today's quote, again, is so appropriate for the discussion today and what we're always talking about with people and your own power. And this quote is, "It is not power that corrupts, but fear. Fear of losing power corrupts those who wield it, and fear of the scourge of power corrupts those who are subject to it." That's Aung San Suu Kyi from Freedom from Fear. And that's something that we really need to talk about. And I really pay attention to that quote. But today's topic, I just sort of summarized, got an idea as to what we may talk about because there's so many things. But power, basically, it's about power held by those who control the global food supply. But of course, it's going to be much more than that. And my guest, of course, is Dr. Vandana Shiva, who is a physicist and internationally renowned activist and biodiversity activist. In so many different ways that she's been operating, not really behind the scenes, because it's very obvious all of what she has done over the past, I guess, 40 years or so. So anyway, all right, before going on to Dr. Shiva, about that quote, I just really want to emphasize how important it is for us to really examine this idea of power and those who wield power. And the reason why we wield power, even in our own personal lives, when we try to control other people, there's always a degree of fear. What is it that you fear about that person, why you need to control them? Well, it's the same thing with these systems that run. What is the fear involved? Why the need to ensure this continuous control? But the only way we change that is by waking up, recognizing that, and making personal changes in our lives and find out what our personal truth is, instead of just handing that kind of power over, generation after generation. All right, so I'm going to move on because I could talk about that for a while. So Dr. Vandana Shiva, as I said, is a physicist and internationally renowned activist for biodiversity and the director of the Foundation for Science, Technology, and Ecology. There's so much here, but I just want to give you a background. Most of you already know who she is. Vandana Shiva is a defender of the environment, as you know. She is the founder of Navdanya, a movement for biodiversity, conversation, and farmers' rights. Shiva fights for changes in the practice and paradigms of agriculture and food. And she is the author of several books, including Stolen Harvest, The Hijacking of the Global Food Supply, Earth, Democracy, Justice, Sustainability, and Peace, and Soil, Not Oil, and Staying Alive. All right, so without further ado, welcome to the Expansion Zone, Dr. Shiva.
My pleasure to join you again after years.
Yes, the last time I interviewed Dr. Shiva was 2008. And I think my show was new then. It was Sovereign Mind Radio, and I interviewed you a couple of times, and it was just amazing. So here we are now, so much to talk about, but here we are now in this, we can't say brave new world, just a weird new world. So where should we begin? We could begin in terms of food. When I say food, because it seems like it's always at the heart of everything, to some degree. Yet there is, how it's used for power and control. And there's also the fact that most people are completely unaware of the degree to which this is affecting them. So wherever you would like to begin with what you see right now.
So as you mentioned, Sonia, my original training is as an innocent physicist with a focus on quantum theory. And of course, I've learned very valuable things, that the world is interconnected and not separate, that the world is not fixed entities as Cartesian thought would have it, but constant potential in evolution and non-separation. And it is really the quantum worldview is the worldview of how life works. Why did I spend the last 37 years of my life looking at agriculture? It wasn't my chosen field. In fact, when I was doing my PhD in quantum theory, I used to live for days, a kettle of water and lapsang souchong tea. And I could have 20 cups of this tea and not eat. Because, in my worldview, eating was extra, you don't really need it all the time. And yet from 84 onwards, I've been compelled to look at it because that is the year. And as one of the things we are living through is a very rapid erasure of history. I always think of all my friends in North America and amazing Black Lives Matter. But the Black Lives Matter begins with colonialism and slavery,
Right.
Where does the distortion of the food system begin? Plantation economies for the colonial empire. Why were Africans taken as slaves to America? To grow cotton. Land was taken from the Native Americans. That's why the land backing movement and the Black Lives Matter are one movement and must become one movement, and join hands with those who are somehow trying to correct the damages of the harm of the bad food system. And really, we should do this only with the color of the earth. That is our color. And the earth has so many colors. She's red soil somewhere, she's black soil somewhere, she's yellow soil somewhere, and her greens are so many greens. And we need to realize we are off the earth. So coming back to 84, it was the year, Sonia, when Punjab, the land where the Green Revolution was first introduced, which is where Norman Borlaug was given a Nobel Prize for creating prosperity. This is where I did my MSc honors in particle physics. I knew the land as a prosperous land, but 84, it was erupting in violence. 30,000 people had died in the violence. 30,000, it's not a trivial number. And because I had studied there, I asked the United Nations University, for whom I was doing a major program on conflicts. I said, I want to study this conflict. Same year, 2nd of December, 1984, amazing Orwellian year. A pesticide plant leaked in the city of Bhopal, killed thousands. Until today, they're dying. Most of the victims of the COVID disaster in the city of Bhopal were those who had been affected by the gas leak. Just like the people in the Cancer Alley in the Mississippi Valley, no matter where you look, it was the earlier violence that made the vulnerability to COVID much more severe. So why were we having pesticide plants in Bhopal? Why were the Punjab farmers angry? And they're still angry, We have 7 months of farmers' protests now, fighting against laws they've been trying to introduce since 1991. And we've been fighting on these laws because they're about total removal of all regulation and a deregulated commodity market for agribusiness to have control. So I did my book, The Violence of the Green Revolution, and then realized that the food system went wrong because Hitler's mentality and Hitler's war chemicals entered agriculture. That's the first thing. The IG Farmer, along with their partners, the Monsanto, people think, oh, Hitler and America were at war. Well, people were at war. Soldiers were dying, but the companies were working together. Standard Oil IG Farmer had one common program in Auschwitz to use the concentration camp labor for production. Monsanto, Bayer, they've merged again, had one company called Mobe. So, the times we are in today are really those Hitler times. And I call this group of companies...
Extension. An extension of, it's like it never stopped. It never really stopped.
Yeah, exactly. So the first step that went wrong is Hitler's mentality of militarism against the earth, against people, and the tools of war, the war chemicals, became the basis of agriculture. All problems. You find people troubled by bees disappearing, poison cartel. You find people troubled by cancer caused by glyphosate, poison cartel. You find people troubled by the fact that autism is exploding in America, damage to our gut microbiome. So no matter what problem you look at. But the second part of this really begins in 2015. And that's why I wrote my book, The Oneness versus 1%, because I suddenly saw Bill Gates running the UN system in the Paris climate. And I said something shifted. Heads of states used to be elected by people, and one government had one vote in the UN system. I said, something is shifted. A billionaire has more power than the elected governments, and they are only implementing. And the situation today on the food system under Bill Gates' control is he's created one agriculture for the world. Ag One he created. And this was happening when the COVID was unleashing. And he's really thinking, COVID will be the place where I'll establish a global empire. He is the biggest landlord in America today. People think, oh man, makes money with brilliant software. He's not written any software. He's stolen all software. Fake food, you see. If you grow good carrots in your backyard, where will Bill Gates make money? But if he forces fake food, Impossible Burger, fake milk, even breast milk made in labs as a climate solution. And I don't know why the women aren't rising. I think, how can you fake it so badly that you cheat us about the power of our bodies? And then you want to offer this as a fake solution to climate change? Net zero. I'll keep polluting. I'll keep flying in private jets. I'll even buy the biggest company to service private jets around the world, because the trillionaires are never going to stop. They're not just going to not stop traveling on the earth. They're going to go off to space and make money. And that too is a business. Elon Musk sells the ticket for 26 billion for someone to accompany him. These are addicted guys. They only know how to make money. So now they're after our food and they're after our seed. So Monsanto was bad enough. And the world got together and said, march against Monsanto. It's time for us to get together and say, march against Gates, march against Microsoft. Microsoft is now grabbing the land of the world. In India, they have done a contract where all data, all records of soil, all records of climate, all records of insurance, all land records will be in their hand for them to manipulate, force you into debt for buying big data, and then take your land as a repayment, which is what happens with indebted societies. You get into debt and then you keep giving up your home, you keep giving up your land, and beyond it,
The
No
domino
kilogram.
effect.
You know, so
domino
I mean,
effect.
this for basically they want a world where there's no land in people's hands, no food. There's fake food out of which they'll make money. Impossible Burger has 14 patents. That's the level of money. Everything will be fake. And we know ultra-processed foods have created the chronic diseases. And because of the subsidy structure, this foods became cheaper. And where you're living in a food desert, you were living on bad food. So you had diabetes. And when the COVID struck, the comorbidities killed you. Now they want ultra-processed, hyper-processed food in labs. But their rules of our body, our gut microbiome has laws. And in effect, they're saying, we're going to kill you. We're going to kill you and we'll pretend we're doing it for the planet's health. So, you know, my passion has been for truth. I did science because I wanted to know the truth about how nature works. If I became an activist, it's because I saw the lies the Monsantos were telling about GMOs and patenting. And if today I'm dealing with the Bill Gates, it's the lies that they tell. So I really feel our time is a time of having the courage and the clarity to identify lies and live our truth and generate the power to live that truth.
That is, you know, like you, I am so passionate about all of this and the constant ownership of power in the same hands generation after generation, and it just goes on and on. And also it is very difficult to see compliance as well. So that's a tough part too, to see where people give over their power. And I don't know if it's just not a lot of questioning, or is it easier? Is it fear? You know, exactly what is it? Because it's so big. When you talked about the Impossible Burger, and then you go into supermarkets now and you see this food, yet people are just jumping on it. And I really, you wonder, you know, what is the ultimate effect of this? And of course, you know, there are people that are going to be upset about it because you're talking about it, but it's not real food. It's not food.
Yeah.
You know?
So I think the reason people slip into, I call it the new slavery. Yeah.
It is.
It's a new food slavery. People slip into it is because they have been brainwashed. They have been moralized. Yeah. And I watch in my country, we have so many poor people. But the poor person who's working on construction site is still cooking her chapati.
Yes.
She's not living on chips because she knows the chapati will let her have the power to work.
Right.
And the junk food will make her sick.
Right.
So who is eating the junk food? The upwardly mobile middle
Mhm.
class. A bottle of Pepsi in one hand and Lay's chips in the other hand.
Mhm.
So we are in a very strange time where those who have privilege for the system are the most willing to be compliant to the new slavery.
Yeah. Yeah.
You will not see
Right.
a hardworking mother who has to bring good food to her children going and picking up Impossible Burger. You will find the people who want to be fashionable about food. Food is not a fashion. Food is life.
Mm-hmm.
But just like clothing became a fashion, those who think of food as fashion, and that is the elite. The elite is falling into this false trap. Where do we make the difference? To know the truth. To know the truth of our body, the truth of our health, the truth of our food, which is the connection between the earth and our body. You know, I increasingly say food is the real currency of life because it is what runs through all species, yeah? Through the plants, through the soil microbes, our gut microbes. I mean, this is what's moving. Food is moving, nutrition is moving. And
if it's not there, though, if it's not there in the way that it should, as you said, especially you're talking with the gut microbes, if we don't have that, it throws the body completely off and makes people more vulnerable and more susceptible to illness.
And that's not all. If you look at it from the other end, you know, who are the poison cartel? They're the same people who became big pharma, you know? Exactly. The same Rockefellers created the big pharma. They created Standard Oil. And, you know, people who want to work on oil, they should go back to the roots of big oil. It's Rockefeller. Finance, banking, big pharma, poisons, IG Farben. Yeah. So here is a very strange economy. The same people sell you the poisons and fake food, synthetic chemicals, synthetic food. It's the same trajectory. Yeah. Synthetic fertilizers, synthetic pesticides made us all sick. Now they want to keep running on that treadmill and sell us synthetic food. But why will they not care? Because every time you're sicker, you get cancer, Bayer has the patented cancer drug. You have obesity, these companies have the patent. You get COVID, they have the patented vaccine. So for them, a very sick population
Lucrative.
is a very profitable population. And a hungry population is a profitable population because they have worked out a system where no matter how poor people get, all our collective public wealth, our tax money, will be used as a subsidy to keep their fake economy running. So what I see them planning is, initially they'll get the elite to eat this junk food. But eventually they will use, in the name of nutrition, the tax money of feeding programs and food stamps and soup kitchens to say this money will only bring fake food to the people. And you will not be allowed, just like they did for junk food. They did not allow, they made fresh food illegal. That was the sanitary, phytosanitary measures of the WTO Free Trade Agreement, SPS measures, Codex Alimentarius. I have had to do many civil disobedience movement against the shutting down of our fresh foods. Women's work, making brilliant things, all illegal. If it's artisanal, it's dangerous for you. If it's toxic, chemical, heavily processed, makes you sick, only thing allowed. So what they've done with junk food and Pepsi is what they will do with fake food if we don't rise. And that's why, how do we get up our back? Satyagraha, the fight for truth. Mandela used it to fight apartheid. Martin Luther King used Satyagraha to fight against the civil rights violations. It's been tried and tested before many times over. Now the Satyagraha, you know, Satya means truth. Agra means the force of truth, the power of truth. Now we have to use the power of truth to defend our bodies, our health, and our food, because without good food, we have no health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't say it any better myself. This is really important. Now, we didn't even talk about, you know, breast milk. I mean, why do you need to prove that you can try to make breast milk when a mother produces the milk? I mean, it's like ridiculousness like that. But at the same time, there are people who jump on the convenience of these things. So somehow they're sold to these certain people who will go ahead and participate. Now, I also want to ask you too, real quickly. You mentioned Rockefeller and, you know, all that he did at that time. What's the comparison between Rockefeller right now, and you talked about Bill Gates, and I know that he's had some issues with India. So what's the similarity? Because it seems like there's pretty much the same thing going on.
So in the 30s, the robber baron was Rockefeller. And then because everyone was getting so outraged, there was a makeover done, and Rockefeller became a philanthropist. Yeah, they actually engineered a new image, and the Rockefeller Foundation was created. The Rockefeller Foundation continued the same work. They continued racism. They continued eugenics. They laid the seeds of genetic engineering. This brilliant book called Molecular Vision of Life, based on the Rockefeller archives, that all of genetic engineering, all of the Monsanto work, the foundations were laid by Rockefeller. So Rockefeller and Gates. So Rockefeller was involved in the Green Revolution in India. They were the World Bank, the USAID, and Rockefeller pushed chemicals on India and killed hundreds of thousands of people. that same so-called Green Revolution, Rockefeller and Gates joined hand and took it to Africa under the name Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. And it's called Agra. I said, this Agra will not build a Taj Mahal. It will repeat the disasters that we have experienced in Punjab, and it's already happening. A very, very good report done on Africa by Tim Wise on how it's already creating hunger. So one is there's a continuity, they've had partnerships. But the second part of it is, just as Rockefeller was being recognized as a robber baron and disciplines were being taken, antitrust cases were coming, and he turned himself into a philanthropist to escape the regulations. Bill Gates and Microsoft were going through a very severe antitrust case, you might remember, on software monopoly. And it's to exactly like for Rockefeller escaped antitrust by becoming a philanthropist. Gates suddenly became the Gates Foundation. So everything Gates is doing, Rockefeller did. Everything Gates is doing, Rockefeller has already done. And that's why I think, history is such an important teacher. None of us can really figure out today's problems if we forget history.
Yes.
Both the history of the oppressor, as well as the history of our oppression, as well as the history of fighting oppression.
And when you said that about history, this is what I'm constantly looking at. I think, do people not remember history? Do you not remember these people can't be trusted? Do you not remember? Is everybody's memory so short-lived? There is so much data historically of these systems and corporate entities and individuals with money that have been able to affect mass amounts of people based on whatever their vision is, but it always seems to involve more greed. It's always more and more of whatever it is for that group.
More power and more greed.
Yes.
More power and control and more money in the process. So they get both political control and economic benefits. But talking about history, I think the forgetting of history is a deliberate erasure. It's kind of the rubber in their hands, yeah? And they're constantly rubbing it out. And Milan Kundera said it so well. The struggle of people against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting.
Oh,
the more we forget, the weaker we are.
Absolutely. And the more trusting people become, because that's exactly what has happened.
Yeah, exactly.
We will save you. And people want to be saved. People want somebody to come in and fix something and with promises. Yes, memory is absolutely wiped away, and we trust you, what you're telling me. And because of that, very little research, and your average individual does very little research. And because we now have the internet, where there's so much data, that people are also confused with finding the correct data. That's mixed in with the misinformation and the real information, and the system telling you real information is fake information, just keeping the people super confused.
Just take one example. So right in the beginning, many of the scientists who were working on biological security, bioweapons, were warning us that the gain in function research being done in the Wuhan lab with the help of the 4Gs via the direct, that this whole system had worked on Wuhan. And these were studied research papers that were coming out. Scientists, the top scientists who were in charge of biosecurity, their YouTubes were removed, their papers were removed, they were all
discredited.
Theorists. A year later, those who labeled them as conspiracy theorists are coming out as the real conspirators. And the head of this Eco Health Alliance, which received so much money from the Pentagon, from the National Institutes of Health, he's had to step down as being head of the investigation team of WHO. 1 year they lied to the world. He's had to step down. And of course, ordinary people don't have the stamina, the energy, the capacity, the perseverance to follow you. Conspiracy theory out, you're out. Yeah. And that's why the whole issue of your own power to discriminate falsehood from truth. I don't think there's any other power that is important. The most important power is this is false and this is true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's it. That's absolutely it. All right. So what we'll need to do right now is take a very brief break. We're not going to be gone very long because we still have so much to talk about. So please stay tuned and we will be right back after this brief message. And we are back. Of course, you are tuned in to KPFK 90.7 FM, and you are listening to The Expansion Zone with Sonia Barrett. And of course, that's me, your host. And my guest today is Dr. Vandana Shiva. And we are having a very powerful discussion and so much great information being shared by Dr. Shiva on important matters, all that is affecting our world today and your life, and the necessity, emphasizing the necessity for us to really take our power back and to understand what that means to take our power back and to take the time to be investigative for your own personal being, your own personal body. All right, now, when you talk about digital agriculture, is this something you talked about already, or is there something more specific that we need to understand? I saw somewhere where you mentioned that.
So, I realized that Bill Gates' Ag One, One Agriculture for the World, was of course being promoted as digital agriculture. But before Monsanto disappeared, Monsanto was talking about digital agriculture. And Monsanto was talking about surveillance technologies. And Monsanto wrote very clearly, head of artificial intelligence in Monsanto said there are only two agencies that need surveillance, Monsanto and the CIA. Yeah. So what is digital agriculture? There's a myth about digital agriculture, and there's a reality about digital agriculture. The myth is we will dematerialize food. And I've just written a whole letter for a campaign on the Food Summit, where this language of dematerialization is being included. Well, if food is dematerialized, there's nothing to eat, right?
Right. Exactly.
But when they made synthetic fertilizers, the buyers, the slogan in Hitler's Germany was, we will make food from air. Because what were synthetic fertilizers? Normal nitrogen is fixed by nitrogen fixing plants like the beans and the legumes in the soil, but they have the power through the rhizobium to fix the nitrogen of the air non-violently and put it into the soil. Also, soil organisms have a way of making nitrogen. The earthworm amplifies nitrogen 5 times more than the normal mineral content of the soil in which it is. So the soil web and the plants have a capacity to make nitrogen. But here was Hitler wanting to make explosives, and Rockefeller was supplying them with the fossil fuels. And they learned that when you blast fossil fuels at very high temperature, at that big temperature, some of the nitrogen of the atmosphere will get fixed. And then they was making ammonium nitrate to make explosives, but the same ammonium nitrate also makes synthetic fertilizers. And the slogan of Bayer was, we make bread from air. Were they growing food in the air? No, they weren't. They were poisoning the land. They were destroying the oceans with dead zones. They were emitting nitrous oxide that are 300 times more damaging to the climate than carbon dioxide. They didn't make bread from air. So the new myth about digital is, we are dematerializing food. And then they'll use exactly the same myths as industrial agriculture. We'll use less land,
Right.
And because we'll dematerialize, there'll be more to distribute and that kind of. But what's the reality? The reality of digital agriculture is the old Bayers and Monsanto and the old poison cartel will grow bigger and bigger and bigger acreages, which will now be owned by the billionaires as the new asset, to not grow food for people to eat. 80% of the food we eat comes from small farms, Sonia, not from the industrial farms. The industrial farms produce commodities that go for biofuel, animal feed, raw material for the Impossible Burger. The real food comes from small farms and gardens. So they're already talking that the future of farming with digital agriculture is ever increasing acreages, growing 1 or 2 crops, more soya bean, more corn, as raw material. This is what Bayer has said. as raw material for lab food. As now carbohydrates and proteins for lab. So there's a marriage between digital agriculture, more land ownership, more poison spread in agriculture, and more fake food. So the system, when you hear digital agriculture, they'll tell you dematerialization, you must think more poisoning, more sickness, more workers displaced from the land, more farmers displaced from the land. So what is our work at this time? Grow real food. 80% food comes from real farms. Make it 100%. That's the rebellion of today. That's the food revolution. And once we get used to it, no one can stop us. If we start doing it everywhere, we just have to say, either I'm going to grow food on my terrace, in my backyard, on my front porch, or create a community garden, or work with farmers who are growing real food. The CSA model, the communities of,
Right.
So many models are there. But if you don't know who grew your food, and you don't know where your food is coming from, all you will have is poisons, more destruction of your health, more bills paid to the doctors, more pharmaceutical profits, and big pharma will take over your life, and you will be lying there as very, very sick people.
It's a
Paying bigger and
win-win
bigger
for them. The
It's a
model
win-win.
is a win-win model. One
It's a
way or
win-win.
another, it's a win-win
Yeah,
model.
So
but
we have
that-
to make it a lose-lose model for them, and a win-win for
Absolutely.
nature and people. Win-win for nature and people.
And the only way we can have win-win for nature and people is when people get on that train, when they get it and start standing up and saying no, because it's a small amount of them really against the rest of us. But if the majority are unaware, of this and are in that zombie mode or have, whatever, under hypnosis, this is a challenge we face. Now, you answered that about health, because I was wondering, what can we look at in a few years to come? What this is going to look like in terms of people's health. We see how autism and many of these new issues have come about from other such things that have been done, which is what you mentioned, right? So here we are now in this model with what's happening with the food. What is that going to look like in 5, 10 years or 15 or 20 years? And when when children grow up and have children, it's got to be changing our very DNA. It's changing everything.
Yeah. So, I think it's extremely important to remember that there are two trends unfolding simultaneously. And they're related. I mean, why would I be saving seeds if I hadn't heard the Monsantos and the poison cartel talking about GMOs and patenting seed? So yes, of course, their monopolies have grown, but so has the seed-saving movement exploded in the world. Yes, the poisoning of our farms has increased, but so have organic farms. The fastest growing economy is organic farming. Yes, the whole junk food industry has expanded with 30 years of globalization. But the number of people becoming aware of healthy eating has also grown, including what I find in the last 10 years is a beautiful new convergence. There's so many people who write to me and say, what you do with soil and plants, it's now getting, I always said biodiversity is what nourishes our health. Now they're finding out the gut microbiome needs biodiversity. Yeah. We knew it from ecology. They're finding out from their microscopes and computer programs that yes, you cannot feed a toxic monoculture to your gut microbiome. So we have two trends. If we allow the disease-creating, planet destruction trend to continue, then of course we'll have a dead. In 10 years' time, we'll have a dead planet. If you are hitting 50 degrees centigrade in what should be a cool western coast, Portland it used to be cold. They had the temperate rainforest. Vancouver, cool. Having heat waves higher than we have in India. So we'll have more of that. We'll have more cyclones. We'll have more disasters. But more than that, I say, the COVID pandemic is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
The true pandemic right now is the deeper health pandemic, which is caused by bad food. And here, the real conspirators constantly want to kill the science of immunity that comes from the food we eat. Hippocrates said, every doctor takes the oath, let food be thy medicine. Ayurveda, the Indian system, says food is the highest medicine. All sciences, true sciences, realize good healthy eating builds your gut microbiome, builds immunity, you are stronger. Bad food, junk food breaks your immunity. And that's why you're more vulnerable to COVID. But at the same time, so there's COVID, there's a health pandemic, which is prior to COVID. There's a hunger pandemic, which is prior to COVID. There's an economic pandemic of total creation of throwaway people prior to COVID. Now, all this is getting accelerated. So we have to connect these different things that we don't usually connect. We have to realize that the climate problem, the species extinction problem, our health problem, our unemployment problem, our hunger problem are all one problem. Problem created by limitless greed. The solution is love for the earth, unleash your power to produce to meet your needs. That's the work we have to do.
I love it. Yes, you said it. You said it all right there, because you just pointed out the levels, the layers, the foundation that was laid to get us to this point right now, humanity. So this has happened in stages to the point where, yes, certain people's bodies are more vulnerable, much weaker, yet the body is supposed to be able to sustain itself and fix itself under the right conditions, which would be the food, which would be nature. All right.
Yeah.
So, and
the risk of COVID, Sonia, the risk of COVID is less than 1%.
Yeah, I know.
99% is the body's work to make it immune. And that comes from food. So here is a paradigm, the environment, food, health as one continuum. And here's another paradigm. We made money from making you sick. We're going to make more money from selling you vaccines. And we're going to make you sicker. And we will not allow you to eat good food, which is why
they won't even mention it. They don't even mention it.
They don't want us to be healthy. The real conspiracy is they want us to be sick. That's the conspiracy. And the body's freedom urge is to be healthy. So all we have to do is ally ourselves with our bodies and with the body of the earth. That's the alliance we have to build.
That's the simplicity of it. We're all from nature anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
I always say, you take away our buildings, you take away everything, and all we have is nature. That's how we got here. We got here naked on the planet. And if we stood naked still, we would still survive, because everything we need is here. So
Exactly.
Absolutely. And you also, now you have the one of the largest, I believe, seed banks. At least it used to be that way, because you started doing this like before it was the thing to do.
87. I started doing it in 87.
Yeah, that was
the seed saving we've done are some of the largest seed banks. 4,000 varieties of rices, 250 varieties of wheats, about 100 varieties of beans, every variety, every possible oil seed, including 9 varieties of mustard, and all the indigenous vegetables which were being forgotten. And the beauty, again, you said, if we were naked and we were here with the earth, we'd feed ourselves. Because we use no chemicals on our farm. The other day, I just stood in one little corner of the Navdanya farm, and I'd love to tell your listeners, visit the Navdanya Earth University website. We offer courses. Earlier, they used to be physical courses, but now we do it on Zoom. In October, I'm going to be offering a course exactly on the issues we are discussing. But I stood and counted in 1 square foot, Sonia, 1 square foot, there were 12 plants, of which 4 were edibles, lovely, delicious food, and 8 were medicinal plants. That's how abundant nature is. And they want us to create a scarcity in our minds, to think their toxics will give us food, their toxics will give us health. And so we've got to just turn our back to them and say, no, we don't need you. Turn our face to the earth and say, we know you give abundance, and we will come in the way between the violence of these greedy men, because they're a handful of men,
Right.
handful of men,
Mhm.
we will throw our bodies between their violence and you, Mother Earth. This is what the first movement I joined in the 70s was, the movement Chipko, where my sisters in the Himalaya came out and said, we're going to hug the trees. We won't let you cut the trees. We'll come between your axe and the tree. And if you kill us, you kill us. I just got an award this year for a woman who 300 years ago did the same in the desert of Rajasthan. 372 people led by Amrita Devi gave their lives to defend the sacred Kejari tree. So we have to throw our bodies to protect the earth. And our bodies, to me, our bodies are the site of revolution.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I tell you, I talk to you and I could just keep talking because this is so important. This is the core of everything that we're dealing with. It's so deep. It's so much deeper than people realize. We're looking at this moment in time with all of this. But then when we look at the deception that we have, that's been presented to us, globally, generation to from one generation to the next, from religion to this to that, it's been this constant manipulation of creating a certain narrative and a certain reality for people to invest in, for people to believe in. And here we are. So it's not doom and gloom, but I think we have to mention these things in order to maybe stimulate thought, stimulate thinking. All is not lost, right?
No, not at all. And I always say, till the last seed is there, you can recreate the world.
Absolutely. And there's really also, we do have a few minutes, but what happened to Monsanto? Suddenly, I don't really hear about Monsanto.
Well, Monsanto was merged with Bayer, with whom they used to be there as Mobe. So when their name got very bad, we did marches against Monsanto. I organized with other movements, Monsanto Tribunal in The Hague. We put them on trial. And it became so clear that this is going to explode. The real cases started to come to California courts, but the public was holding trials. The public was putting them to trial. So the name Monsanto had got too dirty. Right. So they hid behind Bayer, and they called Bayer the aspirin seller. No, Bayer is the poison maker. It's IG Farber, and it is
Monsanto. I mean, basically, it's just like corporations do, they dismantle, start up.
Oh, and Sonia, one other thing, we have a lovely poster my son made on the poison cartel, where he found out that the first product of Bayer was not aspirin. The first product was heroin. And the reason it was called heroin is it makes you feel like a hero. So they started the history of drug addiction.
Yeah.
So the opioid crazy, the opioid crisis, we already know. They locked people into addiction and make money.
Yeah. And it goes on and on and on today, as we see with places like, at least here in the United States anyway, like Starbucks. I mean, there's a lot of legal crack houses. That's what I say. The addiction, the things that people are being addicted to, whether it be sugar, or caffeine or something that impacts the body and brings the body down from that healthy state. Now, also really quickly too, if you have anything that you want to add on this part, because a lot of these big corporations wanted to latch on to this new organic movement. They wanted to latch on because they saw that there was money in it. And they have bought out some of these companies that started out, natural and they're organic. But have some of these organizations changed the face of organic? Do we have to really pay attention to, because now everything is labeled organic? Are there things that we need to look out for?
So the word organic means the science of living systems. That's what the word organic means. Now, around the time where the chemical synthetic industry, the IG Farbens were rising, they attacked the organic way of thinking, which is the holistic way of thinking, the relational way of thinking. They attacked organic as a science. But organic systems kept growing. And as they became more prosperous, they were reduced to a label, not the science. Yeah? So they can hijack a label, Whole Foods can be bought out by Jeff Bezos, But the relationships of the soil with the plant, with our gut microbiome is not stealable. That's why for people, don't get obsessed with where the label went. Just like you shouldn't get obsessed with whether Jeff Bezos flew on his blue whatever. Yeah. Turn to the earth. And if you can maintain your authentic relationship with the earth, your authentic science of living systems, which is what organic is, and your care for the earth to grow real food, they can cheat and lie. Let them grow real food. I think for too long, we have watched the powerful as spectators.
Mm-hmm.
We now want to live real life as participants.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And local farmers, I always say support local farmers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Grow your food either directly or support a local farmer who's growing food. But if you are ignorant, if you are food ignorant,
mm-hmm.
then because food is what you are, then you're ignorant about yourself.
Right.
You have already negated your being and your selfhood, and you violated yourself. So begin by correcting that violation and reclaiming yourself by eating healthy, knowing your farmer. And if this movement of linking to local farmers grows, they can have more high rises, to have more
right.
hydroponics and more artificial feed for plants. I've seen the roots of these plants. I've seen on our farm, the roots just go like this, like a brilliant web, because there's soil in which they are looking for food, and the mycorrhizal fungi is there to bring them food. There's no mycorrhizal fungi in that fake food system. And they're like little weaklings, like anemic.
Right.
And, part of it is I've learned everything about food and agriculture since 84 with a sense of miracle.
Mm-hmm.
The miracle of the seed, the miracle of the plant, the miracle of the root, the miracle of our gut microbiome, and the sense of wonder of how beautifully complex and interrelated this system is. That's the wonder with which we must take back our lives and take back our food.
Very exciting, encouraging, stimulating, and that's all I can say to that. And so I'm really encouraging everybody to get on the bandwagon with yourself, and those that have young children, educate yourself so that you can educate them. This is how we're going to make change. We cannot wait for the system to do things. We have to begin to take that responsibility and make things happen. So we covered a lot. Oh, one of my favorite things really quickly is grapes. It's so hard to find seeded grapes now. That is like so long gone here in the United States anyway. And I love the grapes with the seeds. But for the last several years, what I hear people say is, oh, I don't want to spit out the seed. That's the conditioning that we have. We want everything seedless because we just don't even want to take the time to spit out the seed, or I don't know, or chew it, whatever. But this is the conditioning. This is the programming.
But Sonia, in Silicon Valley, there are these crazies who are taking the Cartesian thought, I'm a thinking thing without a body, and they now want to transhumanism, that the human body
Right.
is a waste.
Yeah.
And we need to merge into computers so that intolerance of the seed, that is future grape, is now becoming intolerance of the human being.
Exactly.
To
Precisely.
be downloaded into a computer and upgraded into a computer. And this denial of life is the sickness of society.
Yeah.
And is the profit source of the robber barons of today. So reclaiming life, celebrating life, living life, the joy of living, that's the rebellion.
That's it right there. Boom. And I guess that's where we start bringing it to a close, because you see how deep that goes. We went from talked about the grape seed and the reason for the eliminating the seed, and we go into transhumanism. This is way bigger, people. Time to wake up. All right. What's the name of your website again, Dr. Shiva?
Yeah. So for the courses in India, Navdanya, and if you put Navdanya Earth University, the courses will pop up. If you're looking for a partner organization in the US, it's Friends of Navdanya. They support our work. You want to contribute there, please do. And then where the campaigning is concerned, the Gates to Global Empire, new reports we do is available, and the fake solutions of Bill Gates, techno fixes of Bill Gates, you can go to Navdanya International, yeah, because we are decentralized, yeah. But for the courses, for the work with the seed, for the love of the soil and the soil as teacher, seed as teacher, peasants as teacher, it's navdanya.org. And if you look for Earth University at Navdanya, you'll find all the courses. We welcome you. I hope I'll hear from some of you. And let's grow this movement of reclaiming our seed, reclaiming our food, reclaiming our bodies, reclaiming our minds.
Ah, yes. And all those links will be available on the website under Dr. Shiva's profile information. So again, I thank you so much. You've been
You're welcome, Sonia.
always.
Welcome.
And to the listening audience, thank you so much for tuning in, for joining in. Do remember to visit theexpansionzone.com for the archive of this show and all the other shows that we've done. Also visit my website to find out more about me, therealsoniabarrett.com, and our YouTube channel, and so on. Thanks to our engineer as well. And of course, as always, I like to remind you to live life to its fullest and question everything. Until next time, see you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody's talking about consciousness. Everybody